a little past 8 a.m. U.S. Eastern time. So thank you for joining us wherever you are around the world. We've seen some fantastic comments. Just saw one the other day, Rich, from Vietnam. It really does. I love it. I love it when I'm sure, not to diss any of our American friends, but
We love you
I
guys
love
too.
it. Yeah, I love it when seeing the reach around the world is really, it's really motivating. So we've had a little bit of a short break, but we are back at it with the Dev Talk Show. I don't know what I was going to call it for a second there. And once again, I'm Chris Gomez with my co-host Rich Ross. And how are you doing, Rich?
I'm doing well. What was the last show we did together? It feels like it's been forever.
It was a couple weeks, and I think it was because I talked about Blazor Client Author. Were you there? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Um, and then unfortunately, both of us have had different things scheduled. My mornings were not free for a little while, so happy to be back at it.
Definitely, and that's why we're a little bit late. Chris and I we're kind of
Yeah.
catching up just in general on things and all the things that we haven't been able to chat about. So it's good to be with you all this morning. So let's kind of see what we can do here. I am readjusting my, and I apologize for doing this on the fly, but I forgot to adjust my.
Yeah, I was just looking up online, where are we with this? Because it was at .NET Conf, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure that I'm right about that. It was at .NET Conf where .NET Aspire was introduced. And so this is a blog post from back in November. And
nice.
I think we talked about on the show this introductory video, which maybe is in the blog post, maybe it's not. It might not be. This looks like it's just a tutorial. But as part of .NET Conf, David Fowler and Glenn Condren were talking about the problem, which is how it could be very difficult for developers to at your machine build like a cloud native application that is a distributed app, right? Whether it's microservice based. I don't necessarily want to get hung up on the terms because it doesn't have to be microservices. It could just be the fact that your app uses a database, or that it has a front end, a back end in a database, or front end, a back end, and a few cloud services. And just, I know I myself have been in that place where I'm pulling the code down and I'm choosing whether I want to run like multiple Visual Studios. And so when I run this, my localhost port has changed. So let me run over to an app settings over here, or a secrets JSON, and change it over there. And it's like, just to do your work, you're kind of being this administrator, IT administrator on your own machine.
Yeah.
So that's not the only purpose of this. Like, I don't want to that's what I think we're going to find out is this is working on multiple problems to, as it says here, help you simplify cloud app complexity. So, I know this was the first preview. What I was looking into is I was trying to figure out, I know there was a preview 2, and I was trying to figure out if there was even a preview 3 as we head towards the Build conference coming up in just a week or two. So,
yeah, I don't. So that's something we can take a look at when we look at the tooling and seeing kind of what's there.
Yep.
But yeah, that is a good question, because I know there was a recent update recent for me. I hadn't been playing around with preview all that much recently, and I just did an upload of the latest preview bits this morning, so that was kind of a good thing. Sorry, I'm getting a couple screens here together. But yeah, what I want to do is maybe we can take a look at this and see kind of what's possible here, and just maybe run through essentially one of the demos and just kind of see what that looks like. So
okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm going to link into our chat and also onto the YouTube video if you're watching in the future or even watching live. I'm going to, it's because I can hit save there, and I don't know if you'll hit refresh as a viewer and it'll just come up, but at least you'll see it after the show. Link to the .NET Aspire overview in the documentation on
Yeah.
at the doc site. So I'll get that going while you're getting set up here.
Yeah. So I need
And
to bring up my screen. Let's see if I can share and present this way. Share screen, in a window, and that window.
is it fighting you or?
Yeah.
Oh, that looks, there it goes. There we
That
go.
good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. You're pointing to the exact thing that I'm about to share here.
Awesome. Yeah. So that's timely.
Oh, whoops. And then I messed it up, of course. So I'm going to have
to
to send it again because in my post here, yeah,
There we go. All right.
see, I did that, but then look what I did. I didn't put a space between the link and the documentation.
Oh, no. So it's not going to, yeah, that's going to be interesting.
So let me figure that out. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, we'll have to talk about a setup show someday here because I've been playing around with some different audio stuff, and I now can look at you and look through the camera and see you as well without having to go to a different screen. So, .NET Aspire, right? So this is something that I've been from a distance looking at and listening to, and kind of seeing some of the community stand-ups that are out there and some of the different videos that kind of come across and talk about it. And I think it's finally getting to the point where trying to get ready to have that conversation with customers around this tooling. So what this is, and it's kind of tough to explain what it is when you hear about some of the things that it does, right? But I think if we can context this and focus .NET Aspire being and I think the first line there kind of helps really. It's an opinionated, which means it's really, has some definite takes on what it is that it's trying to include inside of your development environment, and it's to help you as a developer. And just think about this from the developer persona. As a developer, I want to build distributed applications, and you'll see as we go through some of the tutorials. I might have multiple projects. I have a project with my back-end API, or I might have a project that is, and obviously maybe my front-end app host that I'm using. I might want to have my application to connect to some kind of caching mechanism. All of those things are kind of how I envision my application to be, things that it needs in order to be able to function. As a developer, I kind of want to be able to do this locally and have that F5 development of, hey, just hit the button and everything just kind of lights up. And that can be tough when you're doing distributed applications, because as you think about the things that we mentioned of a front end, a back end API, some kind of caching environment, you kind of manually have to go through and start all of those. And you think about some of the stuff we were doing with when we were working on Tags app and trying to do some of those pieces, right? When we're just using Visual Studio and that dev containers, we had to make sure that we had a container running that had a Postgres database running locally on our machine, and it was all very manual. How do we connect to that, make sure all the ports are open and all those kind of things? And where Aspire is looking to provide some support is how as the developer, do I make it easy to wire all those things up and start at the appropriate time, just by hitting that F5 debugging and getting things running. So there's some packages, there's some different types of packages. When we look at .NET Aspire, we're looking at things that are orchestration based, so having the features for running and connecting those multiple projects together. So basically orchestrating the components together so that they can talk to each other in that local environment. And then there are components, which are essentially the NuGet packages that we can bring into the application or into the project, so that we can do things like connect to Redis or connect to Postgres. And then finally, there is a tooling component. So these are like the three things that make up Aspire. And that can be project templates, tooling experiences, things of that nature, but that you can access through either Visual Studio or the .NET CLI. So easy ways to kind of get those created. So what I plan to do here is, and it was kind of interesting when I think next thing we're going to look at the setup and tooling, but just looking at the getting started piece here, right? It's very easy, and you probably see the tutorial where you bring up And all of this right now is still in Visual Studio Preview, right? So you bring up Visual Studio Preview, you run, create a file, new project, and it's an Inspire project, and you get all of those bits kind of pulled together for you. But you don't have to start that way, right? You may have an existing application, and you can do some things to add some of the .NET Aspire components to that existing application and be able to make it easier to have your app development to happen locally without having to spin up all different sources. And this one was interesting, and I haven't dug in enough to see kind of what that really completely means. But when you say .NET Aspire, that's the only projects I think that we essentially can use this for. But there's actually a sample here that uses .NET Aspire with a Node.js application, which is kind of interesting, right? So, I mean, is this the right one? No, I hit the wrong one. So this one here about being able to build .NET apps with Node.js, I think they have essentially they have two APIs on the back end that they're bringing in and putting the Aspire packages again. So just because you haven't I don't know. I always think of when I hear .NET Aspire that's the only kind of a project that can work with. But there is some capability to, and those Node applications, may have different kind of front end frameworks as well, like Angular, React, or Vue. So that would be a project worth taking a look at. So I've said a lot there, and you've been kind of quiet.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that I've seen is difficult to explain, and even when they were doing the first demos at .NET Conf, which I'm going to include the video for that. And again, this is from November, but the video for that in our show notes below on YouTube. I think it's still helpful to hear them talk about the problem they're trying to solve. And like they say in the orchestration section there, right there in the middle, .NET Aspire assists the orchestration part of it anyways. It helps you with the app composition and also with like service discovery and management of like how you connect to things, because so many of our projects, you need some kind of how many services do we use? There's a connection string that defines where the app goes to do its work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not just for SQL Server anymore, right? They're for everything.
Right.
So it manages that, and that's helpful. But the other thing that's really neat about it, as you can see, as it goes down a little bit, is that while things like this in the past may have been wizard based, or maybe it's about using a technology like a Bicep or some other kind of automation cloud technology. This is saying we're in .NET, so we stay in .NET, and you can write all of this as code. And when we say infrastructure as code, we mean infrastructure as code with this orchestration as code in C# in your application.
Yeah.
I feel like it's almost like the kind of thing you have to see it, and then you can say, oh, I see. Because this could really assist with integration testing, I think. I mean, I haven't. That's the thing I think we'd like to figure out on the show is what kind of problems does it solve besides the day-to-day development, and orchestration is just one piece.
Mm-hmm.
There is some very basic dashboarding. They're kind of giving you this taste of telemetry.
Yeah, locally running on your machine, which is pretty awesome, right?
Yeah. And what I think it can be, I don't think this is the point of it. I don't really want to say that this is, but you're getting service discovery, you're getting some health checks, you're getting some telemetry. And in some respects, this could be a good way to get all of us who hit file new project, and then we say months later, maybe even after we've shipped to production, we really could use a dashboard for this. And the thing's already in prod. So I don't know. It could. I'm hoping that we can use this to try and get some of those really important concerns in earlier. But I'm not here to say that I know that's what we're going to get out of it. That's part of what we're doing, is we're going to learn a little bit together here.
Yep, definitely. So yeah, so the orchestration and discovery bit. So we had that cache object that we create, and then once you create that object, you can then say, well, my front end needs to be aware of what my cache is, and that's how you kind of wire it up in your project file. And I think we're going to do some of that when we go through the tutorial here. But I think what was interesting is you can all the various things that it actually connects to. So if we look at having the ability to go ahead and connect to Azure AI or connect to storage, connect to logging, databases, messaging, which is really interesting when you think of being able to connect to things like Event Hub or Service Bus in Azure that do some of the different types of event or message-based queuing of components there. All of those are things that we can kind of wire up in our application now. Do that as part of our local development, and then not saying that there's a path to get to essentially a bicep file that we can create this in, or to be able to deploy this into our Azure environment, but there might be other frameworks or toolings that could take this application that we've defined and give us the tooling to go ahead and deploy that to any environment we want. And there are projects that hopefully we'll get to explore in the future that can talk to that. There's a project out there called, if you're interested, called Project Radius that sounds very similar to what we're doing here, but think of that as the developer handing off to the DevOps folks as opposed to .NET Aspire, which is really just focused on the developer getting productive.
Yeah, right.
So if we could, let's do, come on back to here. So let's look at the tooling, right? So I've already got, we mentioned this is running in preview, Visual Studio Preview. This is still a preview set of bits. I think in that original blog post that we're hoping to deploy in the first half of this year, I think the latest I've heard is summer is the time frame that I've heard on a couple of recent videos. No official GA has been announced yet, but it definitely is. It sounds like we're, from what I've heard from recent videos, that they're rallying around the summertime point. So right now it's still in preview. Great chance for you to go out there and play around with it and give your thoughts and feedback while it's still in this list, or in this state. So what we can do is we can look at. So we did preview one. We should be able to, I think if we do bring up a browser or a window here, and that we say, right, so there's Aspire, and we're running, it looks like we're running preview 7. If I follow this right. It's .NET Preview.
Or actually,
7.
I think it's .NET 8 Preview 7. That's interesting. I don't know.
That would make sense. Yeah, because it's running.
But that's weird, though, like you said, because .NET 8 is out, so I don't know. I'll see what I can find out while you're looking there.
Okay. Workloads to install. So we already have, and I think if that workload, let me do an update. So oh wow, okay, sure, go for it. Okay, maybe that wasn't smart to do on the air.
I didn't see.
Yeah, I just said update the workload to make sure I had the latest, and it's updating all of the workloads that I have under .NET. So I'm getting a lot of the Maui stuff.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So while that's doing that, let's look here at the essentially at the tooling. So if when you're doing the install and going off a preview, you can include the Aspire workload, which is one of the first check views or check marks right here when you're looking at the image. So that'll make sure that the SDK preview gets there, and then you're kind of seeing what I did there by running the update. But that is everything we need. We also do need an instance of.
Oh, you're right. It says check your version of .NET Aspire. Okay. Yeah.
I need to make sure I have Docker running on my environment, because oftentimes, or a lot of what we're doing is making. So if you need caching, or if you need a Postgres database, having those run as a container, but just being able to wire them up and make them run on them and connect to them automatically in your application through the discovery and the orchestration that happens through that setup. So Docker's going to be up and running. That'll be fine. You can use a different container application, and you can change the settings there if you want to do that. We're not going to worry about Aspire project templates, because I believe we're using in our tutorial a separate app, but they do, as we mentioned, there's you build your first to get you up and running very quickly.
And I think a lot of people get the impression that, oh, okay, so I have to start my project this way. And believe me, I've seen and on the .NET channel, DOTNET on Visual Studio, this has been discussed quite a bit if you go back through the videos and some of the live streams. And I don't know how many times I've seen the team just passionately saying, no, you don't have to know ahead of time. You can add this after the fact, right? Just because I think they know that people get into the mindset. And I'm one of those people of like, oh, do I have to start over? Which is part of like the whole push for our authentication from scratch series, which is, no, you don't have to start over if you know how to add it, right?
Yes.
So
yeah. And I think the biggest thing and I don't know if the plan is to support other frameworks going forward, but it would mean that if you wanted to bring this into your application, if I understand correctly, that you would need to have a project that's running .NET 8. Because that's the kind of the minimum requirement to get Aspire up and going. So
right,
something you should be doing anyway, right? If you're on 7, that's end of life shortly, if not, I believe, isn't like May, usually that May time frame.
For which one? .NET 7?
Yeah.
.NET 7 is May. Yeah. In fact, I think it's like any day now.
Right, exactly. So if you're running 7, being on 8, you should be moving to 8 anyway. If you're on 6, you get a little more leeway. I think you got until
November.
Yeah.
November, right? And so .NET 8's end date is November 10th of 2026. So there is a big, I mean, .NET 8's as being the premier version of the .NET platform, like its time is here.
Yeah.
So
definitely. Cool. So let's do this. We're gonna run through this tutorial here and see if we can get our application up and running. And first thing we need to do is we're gonna get our project down here. Oops. All right, I'm not gonna worry about that because that was probably doing some Maui stuff. I will let that run later, but we should be all right. Cool. All right. Spire's still there. We're good. Let's do this. Repos. And inside of this repo, let's clone this out and we'll call it eShop Lite. That's fine. This is just bringing down an existing project so that we can use it to essentially get our Aspire into this project. The words are not coming this morning. That's what happens when you don't do this for a few weeks. So eShop, right? There we go. LS. So this is everything that came down. We have there's an eShop solution, and I can go over to preview version of Visual Studio. Let's open that.
what was the name of that repo again? It was Cloud Native.
The repo was
back in your command line, I think, because it was in the Microsoft Docs repository.
Yep. MSLearn.net.
MSLearn. Okay. Mainly because what I'm trying to do here is see if I can get this link available.
Oh, cool.
It might be in the particular sample that you're running. It could be in there too. So
yeah, that's where I grabbed it from.
And this is .NET Cloud Native DevOps, I think, right?
Cloud Native -devops.git. Yep.
Okay, and then, all right, gotcha. you took that and you renamed, instead of bringing it down with that long name, you said, hey, I want the folder to be eShop Lite.
Yeah. And
Fair enough.
That's something I mean, I'm glad they threw it in there. I was going to rename it to something anyway,
Right.
because I hate having a long folder name like that. And then,
Right.
I mean, it's descriptive. Don't get me wrong, but it certainly is how I would prefer to look at things. So awesome. So let's drop that out of the way. Let's look at our project here. We can get rid of this. But essentially in our project, and we zoomed in enough.
For now.
Probably could be better.
Yeah.
So essentially we have a project with, a solution with 3 different projects. One that's our data entities and focus kind of on our product entity here, because we're going to see that throughout. We have our products project, which is it's a web API that returns a list of products, and then we have our store here, which is actually the Blazor web app that we use to essentially be our front end.
Okay.
So those are, data entities is also an API. Actually, it's just, it defines the entity that's used in. So it's that one project essentially has references in both because we use that product class across both of those. So one of the things that we want to do is, let's go ahead and we've opened up a reshop project. We're going to open up the Solution Explorer and right click on that and do configure startup projects. Because one of the things we talked about is the complexity of having an API and having a front end and having them be able to essentially start up together. And what we want to do is do multiple startup projects, not just a single one. And multiple startup projects, and then create new launch profile button. I'm not seeing. Oh. I'm seeing multiple projects.
Oh, create a new launch profile?
Yeah.
So are they talking about, they're not talking about launch settings, are they?
I think that's different, but it's possibly related.
I'm trying to find the thing you're working on.
Yeah, and I'm making sure we're in the preview version of the app, which is cool. All right, let's see. Do these side by side so I don't have to keep looking at different screen and the folks understand.
Oh, okay. So you said create, hold on. Let's let me look at your screen again. So you are in multiple startup projects.
Yep. So we're kind of right here.
And then select the create new launch profile button. Yeah, I get what they're talking about, but the reality is that I don't remember I'm trying to remember if there's a button here that we're not seeing on your screen.
I'm not seeing it either, but there's that. Configure.
Oh, did you say you picked configure startup projects, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
let's try it again. So let's go back here. Configure startup projects, right?
Right.
Then we get to this.
Okay. And so actually go ahead and first switch to multiple startup projects.
Okay.
Okay. Now, once you do that, go ahead and pick that you want products and store to start.
Oh, okay. So let's start. So products we want to start without debugging. Store we want to start just.
They have it just as start in this particular, but I hear what you're saying. Do? Yeah, they have them both as starting with debugging, and this is the kind of thing I've actually had to do. Right, I've done this, so
sure.
You should be okay to go ahead and just click apply. Although I agree with you that you are probably saying, "Hey, I don't want to have to do this again and again." And there is a way to do that, but I think it's interesting that it says here, right click the solution, configure startup projects, which is what you did. And then select multiple startup projects and select the create new launch profile button. Okay. Well, anyways, when you click OK here, That should be
Yep.
fine.
I think so. So we'll select OK.
Yeah. And then it's possible that now you have what people can see is you now have, it says multiple startup projects up in Visual Studio, right? Because it's a little compressed, you can't see the play button for it, but that's what you would click on to start debugging.
Oh, right. So
So
we have that right here.
if you bring that drop down, if you click that drop down, I'm trying to figure out if you, okay, no, or maybe because I was going to say that, see, now you've changed it to be just a store, I think.
Yes.
So you want it to be multiple again.
Okay.
Because we're going to start debugging with both. So you might have to click products.
All right.
I think if you click products, then it'll check it again. I could be wrong.
Right,
okay. All right. Yeah. So go ahead and let's go ahead and do this again.
Sorry.
Well, a lot of people maybe have never debugged multiple projects before, or they've thought, oh, do I have to start 2 Visual Studios? Because look, I've lived in that world. I've done it.
Yeah.
But from here, you should now be able to just start the application, which is F5 or clicking the start button. And what's going to happen is it's going to, we have to build, right? And it's going to fire up both applications and open browsers for each, because you have a web API, which Visual Studio by default opens a browser for, and then of course the app. So there's your browser based. And I'm guessing they must have configured it somehow so that the startup page went straight to product, because you did not do that, right?
The startup page started on home.
Oh, well, over on the API one.
Yeah, that's that. So yeah, that's what it.
Yeah, they must have set that up. Okay, cool. All right. So the important thing is that all that we're really seeing here is all this really proved is that in Visual Studio you can debug both applications at once, right? Now, I'm not 100% sure if part of the point of this application is for you to debug that problem. Maybe it is. But Aspire is more interested in just saying, hey, how do we orchestrate this so that, I guess as we keep going, we're going to find out. But today, in order to get things working, you typically what would happen, and maybe this is the issue you're actually having, is that the app settings in one of the projects doesn't match the localhost port that you just got. Like, that could really be the issue you're having. And Aspire is supposed to help us with all of this. So I think, you can stop debugging and we can move on from there. But
yeah, it's interesting, because I would have expected that to just find it, but it doesn't necessarily know.
Well, if you bring up both tabs, what I'm curious about real quick.
This here
is okay. Yeah. So we're on 7085, and this is a peculiar thing about Visual Studio versus VS Code. And I don't want to say VS Code, running from the CLI is a better way to put it, is that if you just use Visual Studio the way it's always been built, is it wants to use IIS Express. And so it wants to add a port for this particular project you're working on. And what that means is that if I pull down source code and you pull down source code, very, very often, almost all the time, those ports will be different. And that's the whole experience of like, well, let me go update my app settings, and you go update your app settings. And I hope I don't forget to not commit this.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's the other big problem is, oops, I committed it. And no, now I changed it to localhost 7130. Where if you're a CLI developer and you spend most of your time, whether it's in VS Code or whatever editor of your choice, you're living more in the launch settings world where you specify the ports. And that's why every time you build a project out there, it's always 5,000, right? And you're like, why is it always 5,000? Like, it's consistent. It's consistent. Like, well, because this is like a Visual Studio. I don't want to say it's a quirk, but you are technically registering your site with IIS Express. It's technically what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I want to remember these two numbers, 7130 and 7085. And let's close this down. Not that this is actually what we're here for, but this might illustrate part of the issue. This is what Aspire is helping us with. So if you go to app settings JSON in the website, which I think is the store, so see the endpoint is wrong, right?
Yep.
And I've already forgotten what it was, if it was 7185 or whatever.
Yep.
That might be the issue, is that you switch that and it works. That's also part of the problem. Is that
totally.
now we as developers are constant. I think it was 71. I wish I could rewind because I said let's remember these and then I didn't remember them. But this is the problem, or a problem that we deal with. Oh, 7130. Okay. So who knows where I got that from.
Hey, I was there with you. It recalled it being right. So let's do that.
Yeah,
Try that
it's
again.
probably 7085 and 7130 or something like that. But in any case, so we know your API came up. Your 7085 is up. Did you have to click products? And still didn't work. Okay, fine. That's no big deal. It could be a certificate issue. Yeah. Not really all that interested in debugging this. That's not the point, right?
Nope.
So Aspire, I think what we're getting at now is Aspire helping us with this orchestration.
Yeah, definitely. Although it's interesting that it says you have 2 pages, and it doesn't say bring it up, but a page displays the home page in the menu on the left, products, see the catalog obtained from the web API, which we're not seeing. So
yeah, right.
That's good. Okay. All right.
Yeah, we already have a problem. But if you're watching, this should be familiar to you, like saying like, oh gosh, this happens to me all the time, right?
Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and Aspirify this application. Jeff gets 5 cents every time I say Aspirify, right?
Yeah, that's true, huh? And well, I'll have to get the link for Aspirify and bring it because I'm not sure if he's trademarked it, but he might if we're not careful. So
I know he's got the URL.
Yeah, which isn't quite the same, but close enough. So anyways, we got a great comment here. I'm just going to read the name: Blazor.NET, C#, Azure, and Unity 3D. And what's interesting here, glad to see more and more content on .NET Aspire. It's an amazing stack. Love the comment. If you have your own channel covering this stuff, which I'm kind of guessing from the name of this account, feel free to share a link and then I will put that up. I'll get it up on screen as well. Okay. So thanks for the comment. And because just from the interface I'm in, I can't just, I don't think I can run directly. I'm going to find out. No, it doesn't look like I can. So, because I was going to say, man, I want to go find out where that is, and we can show if you have content, which is a guess of mine, just based on the title of the account. I could be totally wrong. Feel free to share that link, and I'll get it up on screen for everybody. But thank you for joining us this morning. So, in any case, continuing, I think the next thing we're going to do is so we have an app. We haven't even done anything with Aspire yet. We have an app. Now we are going to add .NET Aspire to the app, right?
Yes. So that's our plan. So we're going to right-click on Store, and we're going to click Add. And inside of Add, we are going to go here. And so we can do this. Yep, boom. There we go. We're going to do .NET Aspire or Aspire orchestrator support. Because if you think of the 3 things, orchestrators, connectors, and tooling, components and tooling, we're going to have the orchestrator component happen here. So let's do that. Add orchestrator support.
Just in case, while you're working on that, just in case people are joining us a little late, I think we want to make it clear that we are doing this first example in Visual Studio tooling, but Visual Studio and .NET Aspire are not linked. They're not joined at the hip. They don't require one another. And that is probably the point of the Node.js sample that you pointed out in the documentation, because typically your Node.js developer is probably spending more time at command line and in a different editor. And that particular example, it's not a Visual Studio based example. And so it's just showing the idea. You got some tooling. You don't have to use the tooling. So here we are. We're adding orchestration support in the tooling.
Yep. And yeah, kind of comparing this dialogue to what's in the documentation. If you're following along there, this is a little bit different, but the important thing to see here is that we will get 2 new projects added. One that is our app host, and another one that is our service defaults. So we'll see those added to this overall solution once we go ahead and click OK. So that's some of the code injection that essentially happens to your application. So here we have our back to having our app host that got created. You can see that one's a little bit darker or a little bit more bold. That probably is going to be our startup application, which it is when you look at up here, right? So it's changed our multi-projects now to just be our app host. And we also have our service defaults that we got included here as well. So with both of that, we're actually going to go into our app host.
And you said this, we got 2 projects there, the host and the service defaults. Okay, fine. That's cool. Right.
Yeah. So we're going to go modify our app host and basically start to wire up some of the components inside of there. So inside of here, we've got, notice the line in the code which registers the store. So they've already kind of done some of that wiring up for us. So if we look at this, it's basically saying we're going to add into this project the project store, which was our web front end component. So we've got that connected inside of here.
And I think it picked that because you right clicked on store to do this, right? Ad. Yeah. So but the most important thing is just because you did that doesn't mean you couldn't come here and change it.
Sure.
But the one key thing maybe wasn't clear to someone who says, I want to go explore on my own, is that app host project has taken a dependency on the store project. So if you were to explore the project dependencies, that would be in there. And that kind of happened. That was the only thing that I'm seeing so far that happened sort of invisibly.
Yeah. So if we look at, I think what you're saying is this, right?
Yes.
So app host is dependent on store.
Yep.
And if we go ahead and look at store, I think store is dependent on data entities and ultimately service defaults.
Yeah, that's interesting that it has to.
Well, the data entity we didn't look beforehand, but the data entity one should have been in there.
Sure, but this is an interesting point: is that the store app that you owned now has a dependency on service defaults, and I think we're going to be able to guess why that is.
Yeah,
but no, we can keep moving just because I know I'm slowing things up a little bit, but
that's okay.
It's not magic.
I think we're good time wise.
Yeah, it's not magic. None of this is magical. The only thing that might have seemed a little magical is that these dependencies got done for you, but this code is telling you exactly what I'm about to do. I'm going to add the store project to my orchestration.
Yep. And we don't have anything yet relationship wise between products other than data entities, which again was there when we started. So we're going to cancel out of that. So we're going to add projects to add our products, to the .NET Expire. So we're going to do something very similar. We're going to right click on products.
Yep.
And we're going to go ahead and hit add, do the same thing. Okay. Orchestrator support. Already exists in another solution. Visual Studio will update it to add products to its orchestration.
All right. I guess that makes sense. That is the thing we want it to do.
Yeah.
It's kind of telling you, like, you've already started this, but I'm just going to add to it. Okay.
Yep.
Because I'll tell you what, when you do something in Visual Studio and a modal dialog comes up, I think all of our first instincts, including yours and mine, was, oh, it failed.
Yep. What did I do? I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when it only gives you one button, which is okay.
Yeah. Like, sorry, go get coffee. So,
yes.
And we can see what it did here. The somewhat magical thing is line 5 now has the products project added. And then what happened that we did not see is, I am going to guess without a doubt that app host now has store and products as a dependency. So what I will be curious about in the future, because I think we'll probably tackle this in another show on let's do it without Visual. Let's do this in Linux. Let's not use Visual Studio, right? Is what's the additional wiring? Maybe it's super easy. For all I know, the command line of this could handle it for us. I haven't looked that far ahead, so we'll see.
That would be interesting, right?
Yeah.
So app host, has the link to products. If we look at products not only has data entities, but also the service defaults as we kind of expect.
That probably allows the service discovery to happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So speaking of service discovery, let's try and wire up some of that service discovery component. So in our app host, we're still in our program.cs file, which is where we want to be. And we're going to update it so that we have a reference essentially to our products. So let's make sure we're in the right spot.
So we're in.
Doesn't really say where, but we'll do.
We're
this.
in the eShop Lite app host project, right? That's where we're at.
Yep.
And we are now as code. We are basically saying, okay, let's see.
Yep, it's kind of giving the rest of that line there. So essentially, what we're doing is we're adding that project of, which is the project's products, giving it a definition of product. Now, why is that different? Oh, that's the difference. So we've already done that here, right?
Right. But I
tooling
think
did
what
that
we're
for
doing
us.
is we're now building the orchestration. So I think we do want that because the next line of code, you can hide it. Just use line 5.
Yep.
And then I'm thinking what we're really doing is we're taking line 3 and it's getting replaced. We're basically going to change the declaration for how this project is added.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So instead of, so
like we could move 3 down. And that was all down arrow that you used there, right? To move that line of code down?
Yes, I didn't have, didn't have Karnak up and running. Right. So, dot with reference product.
Right. Yes. And what's really neat is the IntelliSense was telling us there what with reference does. And it said it injected service discovery into the app. So the point being that we had 2 lines of code. Now we're saying, hold on. Now we're beginning to tie together how they interoperate, and store needs a reference to products.
Yes. Yep. And the cool bit is,
so now all we have to do, I'm sure, is figure out the right ports here, because you
would think we might have to do that, right? But and you were right with the path that we were kind of going down. That was a problem, is the references inside of those back end HTTPS endpoints. And actually, all I have to do now is this, because of the service discovery that .NET Aspire gives us.
Right.
Is that just, I don't care where it is, wherever the products project wound up starting from, that's where I want to go. So
yeah. And you got to love this for your version control too, because now no one ever is going to touch this.
Yeah.
It's just there. It's just done.
And it's the same on your machine as it is on my machine, because it's not port specific anymore, which is great.
Yep.
So let's F5. Let's go ahead and kick this off.
Crazy thing about it is we're getting more functionality, I think, than maybe we realize here. So first of all, look, we got a dashboard that just popped up.
Like, where did that come
from? Showing both projects running. Showing endpoints for the 2. Both in, like, which you could click on, I suppose. And then this was a little surprise too, I think.
Yes, because I think if we should have
look at that running container right there.
There you go.
And it looks like it's a container orchestration. Like, you've got 2 containers running.
Yep, and our database.
No, wait a second. That's not it.
That's not
it. No, that's the Postgres stuff that we've been doing. It is running. What I wasn't 100% sure is if it was running in Docker. So.
Yeah, let's stop that, because that doesn't need to run.
I know. You've had that running for months.
Well, on a reboot anyway. Let's just make sure. Right. So I'm gonna stop that. We're gonna come back into this. All right. All right. And then there should not be any containers running. Okay, no containers running, so that's good. Whew. All right. So here we are. We've got 2 different resources that are started. One is our products API, so we can go ahead and click that and see that we get that same endpoints, or basically same data coming back. And then we've got essentially an HTTPS, an HTTP version of this. And if we click the 785 version, we get that same page that we saw, which is our web front end. But now when I hit products,
Oh, look at that.
look what we
I know.
right?
And
Wow.
we were struggling to get this right through app settings. Like, and it could have been that we needed to use the HTTP endpoint, or it could have been that we had to register a dev cert. I don't know, but now I don't care. Like, just yay,
Right.
it works, right? So
exactly. Which is pretty. Which I don't know. I think that's pretty awesome.
yeah, right. The other thing that you got there, which is hard to show in a demo like that's very quick, is that dashboard. That dashboard is still running, which now you can start looking through things here. And for example, you could look at metrics, you could look at traces. Okay, right, showing you what it's listening on. So you've got the console logs from both applications, which I think is great. And in fact, as part of the 12-factor app, which is not something we've talked about too much on this show, but I'm sure people watching, I'd like to think people watching are familiar with the 12-factor app, is you just write your logs right out to console. They're just streams. They're just event streams. And so now this is even a way, in my opinion, that's encouraging that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So just log it out to the console, have your telemetry pick it up,
Yeah. And if this looks a little funny to look at or parse through, there's actually a structured view of this, right?
Right. Look at that.
So that's all, but we can go back to products and just see the same product outputs that got put out there. If I'm interested, what was the command that got done, I can view and drill in specifically on that one and see what's there.
Yeah. So in some respects, this is already taking advantage of that. Is the consoles doing the logging? We've got this dashboard is coming in, and I'm gonna say this is very 12-factor, like where it's like, hold on, I'll just pick up the log from there and I'll show you the structured view.
Mm-hmm. We also have traces, so we can see how things are running. So when we did our our get products, we're able to see how long it took for that that call to get completed and come back.
I wonder what that browser link is. That a link? If is that clickable? Maybe you did click on it and I just didn't see the mouse. Outgoing call to browser link. Okay.
Yeah, that just brings up this bottom window, which is the get.
Sure. Right. Which I think, again, is a Visual Studio feature, right?
I think so.
Yeah, browser link's a Visual Studio feature that, if I remember correctly, is that the feature that you can make changes
on the fly?
You can make changes to the static files and it picks them up. I don't, boy, all these different technologies, I've forgotten them already. So, and then we have metrics, like you said, which you've already clicked on or we're about to.
Yep.
Okay. Look at that. Active requests. There aren't any active requests
just yet, but I could go here. And see what that did. Oh. Nothing.
Well, because they're not active, right? What about the request duration?
Oh,
there we go.
You can kind of see that over the course of the last couple of minutes.
It's like slowly scrolling away, but
yeah,
it could be that the active request is so small that it's like not even showing up for us. But
true.
The nice thing here is that we're getting some interesting stats. It's even figuring out for us like what's our average, our median, what was our worst case, which is really the kind of stuff that we want to be looking at to know, like you can start to figure things out. Like, is my first hit a P99? It's like the worst possible case. So I don't think the point of this, even of Aspire, is to say, I don't believe the point necessarily is to say, hey, your telemetry's done. I feel like it's giving you a starting point, and like what to watch there. Perhaps another channel says nice chart, which is true, and we're getting that built in with Aspire. But I think it's to start us down the road of you can have telemetry built in from day one.
Yeah. Which as a DevOps person, that's something that you should be thinking and considering early on, right? Because that's going to help you shape the things you need to do to improve it, so you don't wait till it gets into some of the later environments when you find out, hey, performance is kind of crap. But the cool thing about the comment around the nice chart, everything that's in here is using. Oh, what's the? Because we did it in the Hello Dolly application, the components, the Fluent UI components. That's what it is. So it's taking that implementation and using that to build out these charts, which is pretty awesome. Cool.
So yeah, there is a .NET Aspire tooling page.
Yep.
And that's in the documentation as well, which I'll make sure that I include in the show notes. But that particular page has you installing .NET Aspire one of two ways, either using Visual Studio or using the .NET CLI. So you're covered whether you use Visual Studio or not. Doesn't matter if you're in Windows or not. We were making the point about Visual Studio 2022, which I think this is what you have, is 17.10 preview 1. So they're saying it included the .NET Aspire preview 4 workload. So that's our first clue that we're up to preview 4.
Yeah. Yep. So, 10, preview 7, actually.
Yeah, but so you're definitely there. So we know that .NET Aspire's had a couple more previews. You could either, so if you want to use .NET Aspire in Visual Studio, that is currently, I think this is right, that is currently a Visual Studio preview integrated tooling until, I don't actually, you know what, I don't want to speak for him because I don't know, but I was going to assume that until .NET Aspire is considered generally available, which I think we had talked about something they're trying to do this year.
Yeah, the last couple of videos I saw was trying to do something for summer. So
yeah,
or by summer.
Yeah. So again, I feel like the point of this is to give us orchestration, to give us that dashboard, which I'd like it says, it's a dashboard with monitoring, with inspection. I think it'll be interesting to flesh out the use case for that dashboard, because I still feel, I don't think it's meant to replace your production telemetry.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Everything, and maybe maybe I'm being a little too opinionated about the opinionated framework, but everything around Aspire I think about as, I'm a developer.
Yeah, right.
I'm a developer, local machine. This is just to help me as a developer do what I need to get code done and get things checked in.
Yeah. I mean, you make a good point, and you said it earlier because you used it. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to not. Yeah. I was trying to actually specifically not click that. It didn't hurt anything. It was a safe screen. It was just took it away from yours. So there's you use the word persona, and the persona here is the developer, and there are other personas at play in your organization. One of them could be a team that you might call, and every place could be different. You might call it infrastructure. You might call it DevOps. Sometimes there is a DevOps team they have the name DevOps, which might make some of you cringe a little bit. Like, there's a team DevOps. What? That's not what DevOps is. But the point is they're the team that's responsible for deployment into production. And they're the folks that are looking for different tooling, right? They're the ones that are probably a little more interested in your biceps, your Terraforms, your pipelines, your GitHub Actions type things. And I'm still not 100% sure if I'm describing the team that's going to be interested in production telemetry, but there's different personas and therefore different products. Yeah. And I think one of the things we've talked about offline is even exploring some of those other products, because this whole thing seems to tie together into how your organization is going to move code, manage development.
Yeah, and how, when you look at them at first blush, they seem a little, exclusionary, right? They want to use one over the other, but they really, are a progression, right? Think, we're starting here. We talk about doing that file new project and that first developer experience, and .NET Aspire helps you get there quickly. There are other projects like Project Radius or maybe even things like Dapper that are still important as someone who's building distributed applications, and being able to include those for the right portion of the piece that you're building, or the right place where you are in your life cycle of getting this out to past your machine and out to other environments. So
right. Yeah. So we did this is brief. This is a couple projects. We even tried running them, and we could have gotten it right, I'm sure, if we stuck with it. But the pain point of pulled it down from GitHub, and it doesn't just work because I've got to go set up these app settings. If there's one thing .NET Aspire did for us today, is it was the first orchestration where this all stuff actually worked.
And the part that didn't work was kind of the part to show you why it's helpful and useful, right?
Yeah, so this is why it's helpful. So at least one reason. But there's other things that we can do, and I think it'll be really exciting for us to maybe say, okay, well, we have our .NET, we have our DevTalkShow website, but it doesn't really rely on much. And so now is it time to maybe build a little bit of a back end so that we could start to use Aspire with it? Maybe it talks to a database. I don't know. Or other projects, so that we can try to start using these things together more. That's where we'll really explore, like, okay, what is it helping us with? But there are a lot of folks who are super excited about it. We know our friend Jeff Fritz is using it. And that reminds me, let me see if I can get the website up there. I don't know if it'll be easy to find. Maybe, though. It's tough. The problem is that I don't remember how he spelled it.
So it's Aspire, spelled out, IFI. So spell out Aspire and then put IFY at the end of it.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Aspire,
right.
Aspire IFI without the E at the end is another company's website. So
Yep. So no, I found it, and let me.
I think I should be able to do the same thing here, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
.net.
Yeah, .net, and it's right now. It is a blog. It is a blog entry. To be fair, I have not asked him. I have not. Like, I definitely try to watch the streams, but I don't always get to watch them. But it's definitely, and he's been building this little blogging engine in Blazor, which is kind of neat. I think it's Markdown based. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there are some plans to do a little bit more here. But in any case, there's aspirify.net. So
check it out. I'm sure he's going to continue to update it.
Yeah, right. So no, awesome. This was interesting, and we'll have to figure out how to work this into our projects. I know there's some folks who asked about Blazor authentication today. And yeah, don't worry, we'll be back on it because we've spent a lot of time on it. We have a pretty good pathway for folks on the server side, pretty good. And we learned a lot about client, but when we look at interactive auto, you get yet another server authentication, an authentication state provider, yet another one that uses the ASP.NET Identity Security stamp. And so we'll have to go into why and how you can build this on your own. So nice. I know there's folks interested in us trying to tackle how to go pure token based on the client side, because I believe the samples in the Blazor auth stuff are still cookie based.
Okay.
So although there are certainly some videos I can point you folks to that would recommend that you go cookie based anyway. There is something going on in the community right now about spas and security. So in any case, hey, that was cool, Rich. And I'm glad that it solved a problem for us, because it made it feel like, oh, this really did help us, even though we just scratched the surface on what this thing is.
Yeah. But I like where it's going, and really look forward to diving into it for some deeper topics. So this will be fun.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to thank everybody that joined us live. We definitely had some people joining us live on various platforms. We've got some messages that came in from Twitch and YouTube. whether you're watching us on Twitch or YouTube or the LinkedIn or Twitter. We really appreciate it. All the replays are on YouTube at youtube.com/TheDevTalkShow. And whether or not there will be another show this week still depends on some morning schedules, which are still very hectic for me, but we will definitely try to let folks know with the scheduling on YouTube. Because sometimes they've been little pop-up shows, which is still great. I love that people are showing up with the pop-up show and zero warning. Thank you so much. But understandably, if we had a little bit of a schedule, that might help people plan. So
we're getting there.
All right. Well, that's it. And I guess if you're ready on your end, because I know you've got the outro to go, then we will say goodbye. And so for Rich Ross, I am Chris Gomez, and we'll see you all next time on the Dev Talk Show.